All right, welcome to this explainer. Have you ever noticed how some people just seem to absolutely breeze through challenges while, the rest of us get stuck in the mud of our own frustrations? Well, today we are diving into outcome versus problem thinking and how to shift your frame. We're going to shift your frame of reference entirely. Because once you see how this actually works, there's just no way you'll be able to look at your daily challenges the same way again.
So, let me ask you a question. When something goes wrong, at work, at home, wherever, what is the absolute first thing you ask yourself? I mean, if you're like most of us, your brain immediately screams, why did this happen? Or who is responsible for this mess? We naturally default to wondering why things always go sideways. But why do we do this? Well, our culture is just heavily wired for problem solving in a way that actually forces us to look backward. We're socially conditioned to dissect what didn't work. But what if looking backward is the exact thing keeping us completely stuck?
To figure out how to break this habit, we're pulling from the foundational principles of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. Now, these insights basically explore how our thoughts, that's the neuro part, are affected by our words, the linguistic part, which then leads to our actions, or our programming. Interestingly enough, NLP was actually built by a linguist and a mathematician who were studying the habits of highly successful therapists. It basically models human thought and communication. It gives us these incredible building blocks to discover how we manage our emotional states. It literally shows us that by consciously changing the language we use to frame our experiences, we can fundamentally change the reality of our outcomes.
Okay, so an absolutely crucial concept in NLP is this idea of a frame. Basically, whatever you focus your attention on, you're essentially putting a frame right around it. When you hyper-focus on a problem, you step into the problem frame. But even worse than that is the blame frame. This is when you put a frame around an experience and basically just blame someone or the circumstances for your problem. The source material gives a perfectly relatable example. Imagine you have a leaking roof. You might initially think, I can't fix my leaking roof because I don't have the money. Fair enough. But then you add the blame frame. I don't have the money because my louse of an ex hasn't paid me my settlement. Now, what does this actually do? Well, it breeds defensiveness. It breathes helplessness. It traps you inside this tiny, restrictive little box where you have absolutely zero control. And that's the thing, constantly asking these why questions acts as a giant psychological trap. You start asking yourself things like, what is wrong? How long have you had this problem? Whose fault is it? Why did this even happen? Why haven't you fixed it yet? Asking these questions forces you deeper and deeper into the problem. It literally rubs your nose in it. It makes you feel terrible. And here's the kicker. When you feel bad, you become way less resourceful. You stop moving forward, you stop learning, and you completely stop thinking clearly about actual viable solutions.
Which brings us to the core paradigm shift we're talking about today. We need to move away from problem thinking and fully embrace outcome thinking. See, problem thinking is totally obsessed with the past and the present. It asks who is to blame and generates this massive laundry list of every single thing that went wrong. But outcome thinking, that is firmly rooted in the future. It asks one incredibly powerful question: what do I want instead? By focusing on outcomes, you become proactive. You take ownership of the whole situation and actually start moving toward a solution rather than just wallowing in the history of the problem. So let's look at how this builds the core NLP model of change. In this model, personal growth is viewed as a very specific journey. You start at your present state, which is exactly where you are right now, but, prefer not to be. And your goal is the desired state. That's your outcome, exactly where you actually want to be. So how do you bridge that gap? With resources. And look, we aren't just talking about money here. These resources are your mental strategies, your language, your emotional states, and your beliefs. Change is simply the process of deploying the right resources to travel from that unsatisfactory present state straight to your desired outcome. But wait, here is a vital distinction that trips up so many of us. An outcome is not the same as a task. An outcome is what you want. A task is just what you have to do to achieve it. It is so incredibly easy to confuse the two. Writing a report, making a phone call, or, dragging yourself out of bed to the gym at 6 a.m., those are just tasks. But what is the actual outcome you desire? A promotion? A closed deal? A healthier body? The source material firmly warns us about this. Do not do tasks until you set your outcomes. Seriously. Otherwise, your actions are just going to be completely aimless and your results will be entirely random. Okay, so how do we actually design these outcomes correctly? You might already be familiar with corporate SMART goals, right? Goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. It's a great discipline, for sure. But NLP argues that we need to become even smarter than SMART goals. And how do we pull that off? By adding sensory-specific information.
An outcome becomes truly powerful when you know exactly what you'll see, what you'll hear, and what you'll feel when you finally achieve it. You really have to use all your senses to design and fine-tune your goal. This transforms it from some dry, boring metric on a spreadsheet into a vivid, highly motivating reality in your mind.
Now, to successfully build that bridge to your desired state, you've got to run your goal through what NLP calls well-formed conditions. You need to state the outcome in the positive, establish clear evidence of success, check if it actually aligns with your identity, and of course, evaluate any secondary consequences of achieving it. If you run your goal through these specific conditions, you basically guarantee that your outcome isn't just a pipe dream, but a realistic, highly motivating target. So let's break a few of the most important ones down, starting with stating the outcome in the positive.
Think about it. Most of us set negative avoidant goals. Things like losing weight, giving up smoking, reducing debt, or maybe trying to have fewer staff resign. These are all goals directed away from something you wish to avoid, and historically they are notoriously difficult to achieve. Why? Well, because the very act of thinking about losing weight forces your brain to focus on the weight itself. It's exactly like telling someone, whatever you do, don't think about a pink elephant. Suddenly, literally the only thing they can picture is a pink elephant. Instead, you've got to set positive, approach-oriented outcomes. Ask yourself, what do I want instead? So instead of losing weight, your positive outcome is improving your health. Instead of reducing debt, you want to improve your cash flow. You really must program yourself to move towards a desired state rather than just constantly running away from your present one. Next up is the absolutely crucial condition of evidence. You have to stop and ask yourself, how will you know you're succeeding? And how will you know when you finally actually achieved it? You need accurate feedback. When you set an outcome, you have to determine exactly how you're going to measure your progress and with what degree of precision. Are your daily actions actually narrowing the gap between your present state and your desired state? Because without continuously measuring your progress for that sensory-specific evidence we talked about earlier, you are just never going to know if your resources are effectively moving you forward. And here is a condition that, quite frankly, a lot of goal-setting frameworks just completely miss. Identity. Is this outcome actually in keeping with who you are? You really have to ask yourself this, both at an individual and an organizational level. The source material offers a great example for this. Let's say you want to manage this massive, high-profile new project at work. But taking on that project might mean a ton of time away from home, dropping your other passions, and totally shifting your lifestyle. While the project might sound super impressive on paper, it might fundamentally clash with your true identity as a present parent or just as a balanced individual. And if the desired outcome doesn't actually suit who you are, it's ultimately going to fail. Which brings us to our final and perhaps the most important question of this entire explainer. What do you want instead, and how will you get there? It is time to step out of the trap, folks. The next time you find yourself stuck asking, why did this happen to me? Or whose fault is this? I challenge you to catch yourself right in the moment. Stop looking backward at the problem and immediately abandon that blame frame. Look forward. Define your desired state using all your senses, make sure it genuinely aligns with your true identity, and start mapping out the resources you need to cross that bridge. Because I promise you, the second you change your frame from the problem to the outcome, you unlock your ability to achieve exactly what you want.